Hi everyone, yasas que kalos irtate to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're going to be making a roasted tomato and red pepper soup that's just going to be comforting, warm, delicious, and really healthy too because you got all those vegetables in there. Make extra because this freezes well, but let's get started. So we're going to roast the veggies first. I'm going to quarter the tomatoes. I've washed them and I've dried them as best as I can. I'm not too worried about it. Now my recipe does call for 2 pounds of tomatoes. I find that I really don't measure when it comes to making the soup. I just make sure that there are enough tomatoes on here to fill up this half-sheet baking tray. So I'm going to go ahead and quarter the tomatoes first and put them all on a big tray. A half-sheet baking tray is what I'm using. Fill it up as much as you can. The less you fill it up, the more caramelized they're going to get. So if you're not worried about getting too much quantity out of it, you can put less in if you want, or you could separate this into 2 baking trays so you get nice and caramelized tomatoes and onions, which are going to add so much flavor to this. Next, we're going to slice up an onion. So I'm just going to peel it first, and then I'm going to slice it up into wedges and add that to the tray as well. I would normally also add 6 to 7 garlic cloves, but I've grinded up all of my garlic and I don't have any cloves. If I were to add the grinded up garlic in here, which is so finely grated that it would literally burn, that's what would happen. It would burn, so I'm not going to add it right now. I'll add it later on, or you could do some garlic powder on top of these. That's fine too. We're going to just drizzle lots and lots of olive oil. It's up to you how much you want to add to this. I would do a minimum of 1/4 cup. It's going to help them roast in the oven. And then season with some salt, freshly cracked black peppers, aromatic and nice. And then I'm going to add a little pinch of crushed red pepper flakes. You can add more later on. Toss that all together with your hands. If you want to use a spatula, that's fine too. But get it all tossed together, and your oven should be preheated to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. I know that some ovens cook super hot. I know that the oven that my parents have in Greece will burn these if I put it in at 450 Fahrenheit. So you can do 400 if your oven is too hot and just cook it a little longer. And you're going to roast these in the oven until they're soft and caramelized. That can take about 45 minutes. Just keep an eye on them. So my tomatoes roasted in about 45 minutes at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. For the last 5 minutes, I moved them to the top rack and I turned the broiler element on just so they could get more of a char to them, at least the tops can. And just that really does make them so much more flavorful. I'll go back to talking about the roasted red pepper for a second. You can roast the red peppers either on your stovetop if you have a gas stovetop, on the grill, or in the oven under the broiler. Now, I would never roast it on my stovetop because it makes such a big mess and I don't like to clean more than I need to. I cook all the time. I have plenty of dishes to wash and plenty of things to clean. I definitely don't want to roast things over the fire on my stovetop. So I choose to do it under the broiler, but you could also do it on your grill. That's fine too. But I never use the grill, so it leaves me with the broiler. So you basically just turn the broiler on high and you move your oven rack to not the top level, but the one below that. So that way the pepper doesn't burn, it roasts. So that way the inside also gets nice and tender. And you're just gonna go in every 6 or 7 minutes with tongs and just flip it over so that way it gets charred all around. After about 15 minutes or so, the whole pepper is going to be charred all around and it's going to be soft and tender in the center. If you have them in your pantry, the roasted red peppers in the jar, then you can totally skip this step and just take 2 out of that jar and you don't have to roast your red peppers. But if not, this is the way to do it. Once they come out of the oven, you could put them in a bowl and cover the bowl with plastic wrap. Or you can just gather that foil that they're sitting under and just wrap them up so that way they steam for about 10 minutes. It'll give them time to cool too. And then you could just go ahead and peel the skin off, discard it, and carefully take the seeds out and just set them aside. And we're just gonna blend them with the tomatoes. So I have a high-powered blender, but I'm still gonna do this in 2 batches because it doesn't all fit. Even if it would fit, never overfill your blender because if the mixture is hot, you're going to get burned. And even if it's not hot, everything's going to spill out and make a huge mess. So don't fill your blender more than 3/4 of the way max, right? I'm just going to do it halfway and do this in 2 batches. Get all those juices that are in the pan too in the blender. And you could add a little bit of water just to kind of thin it out a little bit more. And puree this until it's nice and smooth. Next, since I didn't already have the whole garlic cloves, I pureed all of my garlic. And I had no cloves in my refrigerator or in my pantry. So I took the cloves that were already grated and I put them in a pot with a little bit of olive oil. and I just warmed them through until they were nice and fragrant, about a minute or so. Next, go ahead and add all of that puree, the tomato and roasted red pepper puree. Add that to your pot. If your pot is already hot, turn it off because it'll start bubbling and popping and you don't want to get burned. Mix that all up and taste it at this point and adjust the seasoning. You could add more salt if it needs it. I always like to add about a tablespoon of granulated sugar to the tomato mixture. Tomatoes tend to be acidic, and even though we roasted them with the onions and they did sweeten up a lot, I feel like a little bit of sugar in this really brings the flavors all together. It's just a tablespoon. You could do honey instead if you prefer. Mix that all up, and then once the seasoning is right, I also like to add a little bit of this balsamic. This is dark balsamic dressing that's in our shop. It comes from Preheat, and it's so delicious that a little bit of the acidity from the vinegar complements the sweet tomato soup so well. So just gonna put a little bit in there, maybe 2 or 3 tablespoons. Mix that all up and your soup is ready. If you wanna make this a little bit creamy, you can add some heavy whipping cream to this and you could have a creamy roasted tomato soup, but I like to serve this up in bowls and put a dollop of sour cream. My sister-in-law got me into this. She's from Romania and they do this over there. They put sour cream in their tomato soup, and let me tell you, it tastes so delicious. I also like to serve this with a little bit of a toasted croissant, and it's ready. Ready for the taste test, that is. Oh my goodness. That red pepper in there, that red bell pepper, really brings this all together and adds so much flavor. It tastes so different from a classic creamy roasted tomato soup. Delicious flavor. 2 roasted red peppers make a huge difference. I think you guys are gonna absolutely love this one. The exact measurements are on the website, dimitrasdishes.com. Head on over there to print it out. When you make it, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And if you have any more soup requests, post them down there too and I'll add them to my list. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you all next time. Gracias.